question that every one of us asks at least once in our life. Sometimes in the quiet moments, and sometimes when we're surrounded by disaster. Is there any hope left? Is there hope for the world? Is there hope for my future? A few thousand years ago, a man named Isaiah was asking the very same questions. What God showed him was so specific that 700 years later, a carpenter from Galilee would walk out of a tomb and prove every word of it true. Isaiah didn't just predict a rescue, he described it. A suffering servant, pierced for our rebellion, silent before his accusers, raised to life. The resurrection isn't just good news for Sunday morning. It's the answer Isaiah saw coming from a long way off. Because hope isn't on its way. Hope starts now.
Well, how's it going, everybody? How many of you build things? How many of you would say that you can create something out of not much? I'll give you a moment to kind of consider whether that's you or not. I was sitting in my house yesterday. We were doing some demo in the former sanctuary, getting that ready for our children's space, and it's going to look great. If you go over there and look right now, it looks like a disaster, but it's going to be amazing. So I got together with a few of our friends here at church, and we took down some walls, and everybody is good. And I realized that sometimes I'm better at demo than I am constructing. Then I got home, and then a man that I thought was a friend sent me and Lisa a picture of things in front of Hobby Lobby. And I'm not going to say his name, but it rhymes with Daniel Bassick. And so Daniel sent pictures because in the summertime, which it's almost here, it's Florida, so summer starts in like February. So in summertime, our house is decorated with lemons and bees because that's just what you do. And so Daniel was concerned that we didn't have enough lemon things in our house, and so he sent us to Hobby Lobby, which is now why I'm broke. So anyway, whether you're a Hobby Lobby person where you take things and you assemble them, or you go to Home Depot and buy lumber and build things out of wood, how many of you would say that you construct something? Raise your hand. Look at all the crafty friends. These are the people you need to hit up before Christmas because they'll make your presents for you. Anyway. So of all of us crafty people, how many of you have ever, once you've made something, whether you built a deck or made a cake or did some bedazzle on your backpack or whatever that is, how many of you, when you were done with that, looked at it and said, that is amazing. I should worship it? None of you, because none of you are crazy. But somehow, that's what humanity has been doing since the beginning of time. And in the book of Isaiah, God is going to demonstrate again that he's had enough of all that nonsense. And specifically in Isaiah chapter 44, God says, enough is enough. We're not gonna worship things that have been made. We're not gonna worship anything that's not me. And he doesn't communicate with lightning from heaven, which you would think there's a point where God says enough is enough. I'm going to start flinging lightning bolts. If you guys don't pay attention, he doesn't do that. But instead, he convinces his people through comedy. And I promise I'm going to get there. But Isaiah 44 reads almost like a stand-up act about a guy who cooks his dinner and then prays to the leftovers. That's really how it reads. So God most definitely has a sense of humor. We've got to file that part away. So we're in the fourth week of our Hope Starts Now sermon series, going through the book of Isaiah. We started on Easter Sunday, and if you've been with us for the past few weeks, you know that Isaiah, it's a great book. Don't get me wrong, it's the inspired, infallible word of God, but it's not the kind of light reading that you would do before bedtime, because God led Isaiah to be actually pretty confrontational and, as we're about to see, pretty funny at the same time. So today's passage is... if there was a genre of prophetic satire, this would be the first time ever. And just like it hit his original audience way back when, it hits us today too. It's going to hit us about where we place our hope. And why that's really important that we get that one right. And so this is all about where we're going to place our hope. So if you got a Bible, turn to Isaiah chapter 44. We'll have it on the screens. You can scan that QR code. We got QR codes coming out of our ears around here. But the QR code in the handout you got when you walked in, scan that one. We'll take you right to it. But Isaiah chapter 44, starting verse 6. This is what the Lord, the King of Israel and its Redeemer, the Lord of armies says. I am the first and I am the last. There is no God but me. So, this is not arrogance. This is ontology. So, it's like a $5 word that simply means the nature of being. And so, what God is doing is he is claiming his superiority, not because he's insecure, but he's talking about reality. He's saying there's nothing before him, there's nothing after him. He's not one option among many. He is the only option. And this goes against everything that, really, I was going to say that we think today, but this goes against really everything that has ever gone on and has ever really been taught in our world. The ancient world had a God for everything. God of rain, God of war, God of the mailbox, God of everything. And each little god had their own kind of thing they had to do. See, the people way back when, they were polytheistic. They had lots of gods, and every god was so-called god. Every so-called god was in charge of their own little corner of the store. But then when the one true God says, there is no God but me, you got to imagine that for a polytheistic, multi-god kind of culture, this was a big deal. This is like, there's a God who's saying he's better than everybody else. God's kind of flexing a little bit. And so we got to pay attention because this is not what we believe. This is not what we've been taught. This is not how my granddaddy did church. This is not, this is not normal. We believe there are multiple gods, and now this one God is saying that he's the only one. And it's easy for us to think that, it's kind of simple because we don't necessarily think that we live in a polytheistic culture. It's kind of easy for us to look our nose down on these people a little bit. But our culture loves the idea of spiritual options. This is not something for way back when. This is for us today. We live in a buffet world. I was invited to lunch one time, and I love going to lunch, obviously. Big guy. So anytime somebody says, hey, you want to go to lunch? Yes. The answer is always yes. I know that you're probably going to ask me for something. I know that you may be trying to sell me insurance. I don't care. Lunch is lunch, and so I'm going to go to lunch. Somebody invited me to lunch one time, and one of the options was the Golden Corral. Now, I know that the Golden Corral is much like soccer. You either love it or you hate it. There is no in between. And so the Golden Corral for me is one of those places where I used to love. In fact, I think that this body has been brought to you largely in part by the Golden Corral. But it's been a long time because one time at the Golden Corral, I saw a smallerish person who was currently having abandonment issues because mom and dad were probably eating somewhere else, and this child was very unattended and very active and very excited about all the offerings at the Golden Corral. And like smallerish people do, they're pretty gross. I know that all of our smallerish people are over at Children's Church now, so I don't mean to speak ill of those who are absent, but I will. So if you have children, or if you have grandchildren or nieces or nephews, you know that they are the gift of God into our lives, but they are absolutely disgusting. And so this little disgusting child with abandonment issues wrecked the Golden Corral experience for me. I won't tell you exactly what happened, but there was nose picking involved, and then he wanted to go in for food. So I am anti-Golden Corral. And it turns out that I have a spiritual leg to stand on as being one who is against the idea of a buffet, specifically Golden Corral. If anybody is in the leadership team, in the C-suite of Golden Corral, I love you, Jesus loves you, just step it up. So I'm not meaning to disparage, but I am. So I believe that God and I are on the same page with this one because God thinks about buffets the way I think of buffets. That is, they aren't good. They're gross. There's just not, it's not something that we are going to entertain. Now, the reason God doesn't like buffets is because you and I live in a spiritually minded culture where we are okay with spiritual buffets. God doesn't like that. So what do I mean by that? It means we adopt a little Buddhism here, a little yoga philosophy there, maybe a verse or two from the Bible if it makes you feel good, and we just kind of gather all of these spiritual components and we plop them on our plate and we say, this is dinner. And you realize when you get back to your table that all you have to nourish yourself is, fried chicken, fried steak, and okra that has also been fried because you want to tell your spouse that you ate a vegetable. And you realize that this is no way to live. This is no way for me to thrive as a human being who needs actual, nutrients in my body. And I and God are both on the same page with buffets. Not a good thing. And so God says, you can try to get a little Buddhism here, and you can try to get a little yoga philosophy here, and you can even, grab a verse or two out of context from the Bible here and think that you are being spiritually nourished, but you're not. And God says, I want to get rid of spiritual buffets. He doesn't compete. He reveals himself. He is not a God. He is the God. And that is exactly what he is saying through the prophet Isaiah. I know that you like to feel better, and I know you don't want to make anybody mad by saying, I don't agree with you, or I don't think that's right, so you just go along to get along. But God says, I am not in the competition business. I am God, and that's it. So, back to the text, verse 7. This is where it starts to get funny. Who, like me, can announce the future? Let him say so and make a case before me, since I have established an ancient people. Let these gods declare the coming things and what will take place. So God is, again, starting to flex a little bit. He's saying, you want to compete with me? Fine. Tell the future. You tell me what's going to happen, and then maybe I'll start believing you. And the reality is, I'm going to spoil the ending for you. These idols can't do that. They never could because they're not real. And when God says that I'm the first and the last, he's declaring his sovereignty over not just that part of the world, not just that point in history. He's declaring his sovereignty over all of it. And this is the same language, by the way, that Jesus would use later on as revealed to John in Revelation chapter 1, starting in verse 17. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. He laid his right hand on me and said, don't be afraid. Here's the phrase that pays. I am the first and the last, the living one. I was dead, but look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. So anytime you talk to people and say, I prefer the God of the New Testament over the God of the Old Testament, because the God of the Old Testament seemed kind of mean. He seemed a little grumpy. And so the God of the New Testament is all about love and all about Jesus and all about forgiveness. I like that, but I don't like it. It seems that the God of the Old Testament talked a little bit more about condemnation and a little bit more about consequences for sin, more about what you couldn't do than what you could do. And I'll go ahead and let you in on a secret. It's the same God. It's the same God. The same God. He expects the same things, but he extended grace. He still has the same kind of covenant relationship with those who place their faith and trust in him through Jesus. But it's the same God, same requirements. The I am who spoke to Moses in the burning bush is the same I am who walked out of that tomb on Easter morning. He alone has the authority to expose the foolishness of idolatry, which is exactly what he's doing, and he's going to dig in a little bit deeper. And by the way, this declaration of I'm the first and the last, it's not just poetry, nor is it just a flex of might. It's a statement about the nature of reality. God's self-existence, his independence from anything outside of himself. He doesn't derive his being from anyone or anything. He just simply is. And compare that to other so-called deities. These other so-called gods in human history. Zeus needed the Titans. The Egyptians had their origin stories that didn't make any sense at all. The Canaanite deities fought each other to see who the real deity was. But God, he has neither origin nor rival. Sure, he has enemies, but he has no rival. So there is something altogether different about God because he is utterly and completely and eternally self-sufficient. Go all the way back to Exodus chapter 3 when God truly reveals himself to Moses. And he said, I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. So the I am has sent you when you go to confront the Egyptians who are holding captive my people. And this I am language matters because if God is the first and the last, then everything finds its meaning in him. Your story then is no longer a random collection of events. It's part of his story. Your pain isn't just meaningless suffering. It's woven into a narrative that talks about grace long before you were even born. Your choices matter because they're made in the context of God's good and eternal purposes. And so everything matters because God is the first and the last. There is no other God but him. There is no one worthy of worship. There's no one who can save. There's no one who has absolutely no rival. Nobody can even come up near me because of who I am. I have always been and will always be. And so God is establishing kind of the rules of engagement. This is God. This is who you're dealing with. Now that you know who I am, I'm going to compare who I am to what everybody else believes and what everybody else seems to want to worship. And so we get back to Isaiah. And what follows in verses 9 through 20 is among the most brutal roasts in all of Scripture because God is going to take down the idea of idol worship. So we see that God isn't offended by it. He thinks it's just dumb because it is. And if you're an idol worshiper, relax, it's going to get good. So here we are, Isaiah 44, starting in verse 14. He cuts down cedars for his use. Or he takes down a cypress or an oak. He lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a laurel, and the rain makes it grow. A person can use it for fuel. He takes some of it and warms himself. Also, he kindles a fire and bakes bread. He even makes it into a god and worships it. He makes an idol from it and bows down to it. He burns half of it in a fire, and he roasts meat on that half. He eats the roast and is satisfied. He warms himself and says, I am warm, I see the blaze. He makes a god or his idol with the rest of it. He bows down to it and worships and prays to it. Save me, for you are my God. Now, I don't know if you saw what Isaiah was doing. He's describing some random guy's day. So, chop down a tree, step 1. Step 2, use half of it to cook dinner. Step 3, warm yourself by the fire. Step 4, carve the other half of that tree into a statue. Step 5, carve that into this idol thing and fall down and worship it. And then step 6, pray to that thing for salvation. So God is pointing out the ridiculous nature of the whole thing. He's saying you're literally worshiping leftovers. The God that you're bowing to came from the same tree that you just used to grill your burger. And that's what you think can save you. I don't know how things are in your house. But in our house, when it comes time to eat, clearly, I'm very serious about it. And so when it comes time to eat, we have a couple of options. Thank the Lord that Blankner's School just did those Papa John's half-off coupon things. Praise God for Papa John's. But if it's not a Papa John's night, which it can't be very often because I want to live long enough to, see next week, so I don't eat that much Papa John's. So we got two options, really. We're going to make something new, or it's leftovers. Now, I don't know how leftovers go in your house, but in my house, we got these containers. It seemed like a few years ago we were worried about microplastics. That's gone out the window because we bought these containers that look like you get something to go from the Olive Garden. And so you take the thing that you didn't eat, which is an act of God, by the way, anyway, because everything's so good, I want to eat all of it, but we have leftovers, we have things left, so we shove it in these plastic containers and stick it in the fridge. And in they stay. And I am supposed to, for lunch, grab one of those unidentified plastic containers that lives in the fridge and bring it to work, or while I'm walking the dog, stick it in the microwave, and I have leftovers. And life is supposed to be good. There's something, though, at least he's a great cook. There's something, though, about the idea of leftovers that is rather unappealing. I'm sure it's the microwave. It's not you. It's the microwave. The microwave does something. It scrambles whatever atoms. Again, not a scientist, but it scrambles whatever the atoms, and it makes something good into something not so great. And I don't know what it is about leftovers in your house, but in leftovers in my house, That's not something we all get excited about because it's leftover. And God is saying, you really, when you think about it, you are worshiping Tuesday's mac and cheese. And you expect Tuesday's mac and cheese to be the one thing in your life that will lift you out of whatever anxiety drilled down pit that you're in, to bring you up to new heights and give you hope and purpose and meaning. That's a lot to ask for Tuesday's mac and cheese. That's a lot to ask for today's mac and cheese. And God is saying, will you stop worshiping leftovers? Because when you open your eyes and see what it is, it's just Tuesday's mac and cheese. And God is saying there's so much more. When you look around at what you are using to reheat Tuesday's mac and cheese, where did that come from? The tree that you used to take down, to cut it in half, first to build yourself a fire. Whose idea was that? Whose idea was trees? Whose idea was fire? Whose idea was an atmosphere that fire could exist so that you could warm yourself and reheat Tuesday's mac and cheese? God says, if you would just pay attention, then you'll see that there is something much greater to be worshiped than Tuesday's mac and cheese. A guy named Dave Barry. I used to read all of his, he was a columnist, really funny guy. And he wrote this. It's a great quote, so I'm going to read it verbatim. He said, karate, one of you perked up. Karate is a form of martial arts in which people who have had years and years of training can, using only their hands and feet, make some of the worst movies in the history of the world. Now, that's true. But what Isaiah would say is making your own idol is a form of craftsmanship in which people work really, really hard. People with great skill and great imagination can create the least effective deity in the history of the world. And his point is that idols are powerless. They can't save. They're just stuff. Maybe expensive stuff. Maybe nicely carved stuff. But stuff. And before we consider ourselves superior to our 8th century BC counterparts, we don't worship down to wooden statues. Let me bring this idea into the 21st century. We don't carve idols out of oak trees anymore. But we absolutely still worship things that we make. We worship our careers. We build them with our hands. We invest our best years into them. We sacrifice our families for them and look to them to give us identity and worth. We worship our reputation. We craft our personal brand. We manage our image and control the narrative and pray to the God of public opinion that we live to see another day in the approval column. Same tree, different carving. We make it, and then we bow to it. It's just as empty and ridiculous as what Isaiah was describing. I mean, think about how this exists in our culture. A young professional spends 80 hours a week building a startup. She pours everything into it. Her creativity, her relationships, her health. The startup becomes her identity. And when somebody asks, like, who are you? She doesn't say, well, I'm so-and-so's kid, or, I'm a daughter of the king. I'm a friend. She doesn't say that. She says, I'm the founder of X company. And when that company goes under, as many do, she doesn't just lose a business. She loses herself. She loses her identity because she's been worshiping something that she built with her own hands. And even more subtle is the idol of family. And of course, family is a gift from God, a good and perfect and wonderful gift. But when we make our kids the center of our universe, when their success becomes our salvation, when we can't be happy unless they're happy, you know what I'm saying? We've turned that blessing into an idol. We've made them carry a weight that they were never meant to carry. We're asking them to be our God, and when they don't, we resent them for not being able to do that which we hope they would do. And Isaiah, I'm telling you, if he showed up today, he would look at our world and he'd say, well, thank God you don't have any, oak things that you're worshiping. But he would still shake his head because there's plenty of stuff that we are worshiping. So many things that we create. Same tree, different carving. We're still carving gods out of created things. We're still praying to the things that we've made instead of the one who made us. And so Isaiah's point still resonates. It's ridiculous. And what makes this passage even more ridiculous is that God isn't mocking the idol. when you really think about it, you think, oh, okay, there's some funny things in there. He's probably making fun of the whole thing. He's really not mocking the idol. He's grieving for the person who made the idol. And that when you get to that point, you're like, oh, that's me. God's not making fun of the thing that I'm devoting my life to. He's worried about me because he loves me. How do I know that? Well, I kept reading in Isaiah 44. Let's get down to verse 20. It says this, he feeds on ashes, talking about this person who makes idols. He feeds on ashes. His deceived mind has led him astray, and he cannot rescue himself or say, isn't there a lie in my right hand in this thing that I've made? Think about ashes. They have no nutritional value. We were talking to our son. My buddy Phil got me into the Blackstone griddle universe a couple of years ago on a mission trip, and I've never been the same. So you can be an evangelist about all kinds of things. I highly encourage you to be an evangelist about Jesus, but you can also be evangelist about Blackstone griddles. And so I got bit by the bug, and I told my son, you got to get a Blackstone, buddy. It'll change your life. So the other day, he made a pizza on the Blackstone. I thought, I didn't know you could do that. That's pretty cool. But my son is a wonderful gift of God. He's brilliant, brilliant mind. Loving husband, great father, has a little trouble with paying attention to details, like cooking times. So puts the pizza on the Blackstone and pushes little Miss Emery in the swing and throws the ball to the dog. His dog's name's Colonel Sanders, so that's pretty cool. So he's throwing the dog to Colonel and realizes that something is happening over the Blackstone. And it looks like, really, an industrial accident had taken place because it's billowing smoke, I guess, shoots up out of it. And because my son is wise, he gets that from his mother, but because he is wise, he is thrifty. And he decides, you know what? I'm still eating it. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it looks like I scooped it up out of a cow pasture, which is kind of what it looked like. I'm going to eat it because I made it. I spent the money for the ingredients. I'm eating it. My son was feeding on ashes, and you could see it in his face. At first, he had pride of creation. Look at this thing that I've made, Father, with my own two hands. With my wits about me, I have harnessed the power of the Blackstone, and I give you pizza. What used to be pizza. It's feeding on ashes. And my son, who I love dearly, has a bit of an ego. He doesn't get that from his mother, gets it from me. So, sad to say. And he was committed. I've made this. This is my creation. He probably even named it because he's weird. But this is mine. I'm going to eat it. And there was something that switched in his brain. He's like, I am eating ashes. This is awful, and it will likely kill me. And he stopped. Even though his ego took him to the place where, you know what, I'm going to eat this. His own wife, the sweetest person you could ever meet, dear sweet Anna, she is a godsend. She never talks bad about anybody. She's just sweet as can be. Even she started mocking her own husband, like, you are not going to eat that. Watch me. I've made this. And he couldn't finish. In fact, he could barely choke down a couple of bites. You know why? Because he was feeding on ashes. Ashes have no nutritional value at all. Go back to Isaiah 44, verse 20. The person who's eating on them. Their mind has been so deceived that they believe this thing that they've made that has no value at all is the very thing that will keep them alive. Not just keep them alive, but allow them to live a life that only few could ever achieve. This is where Isaiah stops being funny. Isaiah is reminding us that idolatry isn't just foolish. It destroys our soul. When you worship something other than God, you're not just wasting your time, you're wasting your life. There's an ancient principle that's buried in Scripture that we ignore way too often. And that is that you and I, you may want to write this down, you and I become what we worship. I'm going to say that again. This is a biblical principle. You and I become like what we worship. I'm going to read this to you from the book of Psalms, Psalm 115, starting in verse 4. Their idols are silver and gold, made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear. They have noses but cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throats. Those who make them, listen, those who make them are just like them, as all who trust in them. So this idol can't speak, and eventually neither can you. The idol can't see, and eventually you're blinded to the truth. This idol has no life, and eventually yours becomes nothing. We live in a culture where everybody wants to be an influencer. That's the biggest goal. I've talked about this before. There's a section in Walmart for influencers. And if you go to Walmart to be an influencer, God bless you, you are starting at the lowest rung possible. But there's a section where you can buy your own ring light, your own camera, and your own tripod, and out you go. You influence a culture. But the problem with this influencer culture that we live in, it's spiritually dangerous because we're worshiping things that we create. And we're becoming these curated images. There's filters and everything else and multiple takes to say what you want to say rather than having a conversation eyeball to eyeball with a friend. You do as many takes as it is required to get your message across and just hope that you get one more click. And we wind up becoming like they are. Filtered, yes, but also hollow. That's why worshiping your career will leave you empty even when you succeed, because your career, it can't love you back. It just can't. That's why chasing approval is going to destroy you, because people's opinions change in an afternoon. I mean, one day you're in, the next day you're out. You spend your whole life trying to satisfy a God that can never be satisfied because it's not God. You know why? Because it feeds on ashes. It feeds on emptiness. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, is that we know that what we are chasing cannot deliver, yet off we run. That's the trap of idolatry. You're stuck feeding on ashes, knowing that it's not working, but you can't break free from it because this is what I can control. Which is what makes what happens next in Isaiah so shocking. Because just when you think that Isaiah's done ripping on idols, God does something unexpected. He doesn't condemn them. He doesn't abandon them. In fact, he calls them home. So Isaiah 44, back to Isaiah 44, starting in verse 21. Remember these things, Jacob and Israel. So Jacob, his name was changed by God to Israel. So those two names are used synonymously to describe the same people. So remember these things, Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I formed you. You are my servant. Israel, you will never be forgotten by me. I have swept away your transgressions like a cloud and your sins like a mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. So after all the jokes, after all, the exposing of the foolishness, after showing how spiritually bankrupt idolatry is, God says, come on back. I've already dealt with all that stuff. It's already been taken care of. Return to me. That's grace. That's the gospel hundreds of years before Jesus walked on the earth. And God isn't mocking idolaters to be mean. He's not tearing down false gods just to seem superior. He's doing it to rescue his people because he loves them, because they belong to him. Look at the language. I have formed you. You will never be forgotten by me. I have redeemed you. Last week, we talked about what this is. This is covenant language. This is much deeper than fondness. This is we're locked in. This is covenant love. God is saying, you're mine. I made you. I haven't forgotten you. Even though you've chased after these worthless things, even though you keep trying to eat ashes, I'm inviting you back. Notice he didn't say after you clean yourself up first. He's saying, I have already cleared you. I've already cleaned you. I've gone ahead of you. I've swept away those offenses like a cloud. That is grace that goes before us. God doesn't wait for us to get our act together. He makes the first move. He does the work of redemption before we even turn around, which points us directly to the cross. This whole thing started with Isaiah, as we were digging into it. Whole thing started with God giving Isaiah what he was going to do to finally make right Everybody who'd walked away from God, which is, by the way, all of us. The ultimate fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 44 is that Jesus didn't come to mock us. He came to rescue us. Why? Because we were eating ashes and thought we were doing pretty good. He saw that we were trapped in this system of idolatry, deceived and unable to save ourselves, and he said, I'm going to go get them. In fact, Romans 5:8, the verse that we probably quote more often in this room than any other verse, it says this, but God, who proves his own love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Not after we got cleaned up, not after we quit bowing down to our idols, but while we were still sinners. Jesus swept our offenses away like a cloud. He took our sin, all of it, and nailed it to the cross. And then he looks at us and says, hey, come on back to me. I've redeemed you. All this stuff is taken care of. So I guess if you're here today and if you're tired of eating ashes, if you're exhausted from chasing things that can't satisfy, if you're trapped in a cycle of worshiping that is slowly killing you, God is not mocking you. He's calling you home. He's the first and the last. He's the God who made you, the God who hasn't forgotten you, and he's already dealt with your sin. The work is done, and all he's asking is that you turn around and come back. And maybe for you, the idol is success. You've been climbing the ladder, checking all the boxes, achieving the goals, and you finally discovered that it's all ashes. Come on home. Maybe for you, the idol is approval. You've been performing, you're riddled with what I've got, which is a people-pleasing kind of philosophy. You've been curating your image, and you're exhausted. God says, come home. Maybe for you, the idol is control. You've just white-knuckled the whole thing, trying to have your way or nobody's way, trying to, get everybody in the universe to play ball according to your rules, and it's crushing you because you can't control even one outcome, much less all of them. Jesus looks to you and says, come on home. And the result of the salvation that God described to Isaiah, had him write it down. Let's jump on back to Isaiah 44. What's the result of us responding to God's invitation to come on back? Well, it's right here in verse 23. Rejoice, heavens, for the Lord has acted. He's already done the hard work. Shout, depths of the earth. Break out into singing, mountains, forests, and every tree in it. For the Lord has redeemed Jacob and glorifies himself through Israel. I tell you, Isaiah wants us to see a phrase that I used to hear a lot when I was in high school and in athletics. That second place is nothing but first loser. There is no other God who can save you. There is no other hope that holds fast. There is no other love that lasts. It's God or it's ashes. It's the first and the last, or you're feeding on emptiness. It's the God who sweeps away your sin, or it's the God that you carved out of Tuesday's mac and cheese. If you choose him, if you turn from your idols and return to the God who made you, you'll discover something the prophet knew all along. And that is that hope starts right now. I'm telling you, there are so many things that we look to for salvation and hope and security. None of it lasts. It's like eating ashes. There's only one God who can save. He is the first and the last. Let's pray.